All right, I'm going to begin by asking a personal question of all of you in the room, which is how many of you sleep with your phone? I didn't mean it like that. I have to, I've gotten to the point where I have to put my phone in the basement, which is 2 floors down, so that I'm not even tempted when I wake up in the middle of the night to reach and grab for my phone, because I know if I do that I'm going to get stuck in some sort of endless scroll, which I will go through in a zombie-like state, which I won't even remember in the morning, except for the fact that I'll wake up with my circadian rhythm having been completely disrupted. And I think the point that I'm trying to make is that these technologies, our phone being the most obvious example, are things to which we've become addicted. Our addiction to our phone, I think, it's actually, I would argue it's grown to become a public health crisis, not just because of the way that it disrupts us. We could see this, I think, most evidently with kids. I was actually at a conference this last week in Washington with a bunch of public health advocates, and it was about screen addiction for kids. And I think we pay attention to kids and screens for pretty good reason, because we can see the effect, we can see what happens when they get stuck watching mindless YouTube channels over and over again. And there's always that kid in the restaurant that you see and you look at them and you're quite frankly horrified that their parent would put them in that kind of situation. And so it's very easy to focus on kids. And so I was at this conference with a lot of very earnest activists, and then I looked out over the course of the room, and what I saw was that the activists themselves were sitting there with their devices. And so I think all of us, to a very large extent, are addicted. The thing that we need to understand is that this addiction is not an accident. This addiction has been reverse engineered by the companies that produce these devices and produce these platforms. And one analogy is to food. And in much the same sort of way that in the 1950s, Americans experienced this revolution in food, where it seemed amazing that you didn't have to go to the store every day, that you didn't have to clean up pots and pans. There were processed foods and TV dinners and the like. And then we woke up many, many decades later and we said, holy cow, these foods were stuffed full of salt, sugar, and lipid, and they were reversed engineered to remake our palates and to addict us. And we didn't wake up soon enough, because they did tremendous damage to our waistlines and to our planet. And we're undergoing a very, very similar sort of revolution now as it relates to the technologies that we use. That our phones and all these platforms that we use on a daily basis make our lives much more efficient in much the same sort of way that food revolution made our lives efficient. But we need to pay attention to what's happening, because we don't want to wake up many decades later to say that we've become mentally obese. And so I wrote this book about, it's largely about these four companies, Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, that loom over our lives. And they've become thoroughly enmeshed in our everyday existence. They've acquired tremendous power over markets, over the public sphere, over democracy itself, and also our very future as a species. Because human beings have always had technology, and technology is one of those things that you could actually say maybe even defines us as a species, our ability to affect our environment. But we're dealing with things that are entirely different, because these are intellectual technologies. And the merger that's happening right now is different than a hammer, which is an extension of your body, or different than a factory, which automates upper body strength. We're merging in a much different sort of way with much different technologies. And there's a thing, we already wear these technologies on our wrists if you wear an Apple Watch. Augmented reality is here. The New York Times allows you to do all sorts of things on their website while watching the Winter Olympics, and soon we're going to be wearing some form of augmented reality, probably on the bridge of our nose. Sergey Brin, who's one of the co-founders of Google, talks about the day when Google will be implanted in your brain. And the point that I wanted to make in this book is that we're not just merging with machines. We're merging with the companies that produce and operate those machines. And so their values end up becoming our values. So we see this right now in this race to create a personal assistant. You stick the Amazon device in your house, or the Google device in your house, or the Apple device in your house. And the point is that these devices are supposed to help wake us up in the morning and then guide us through our day. And that they want to be in a conversation with us over the course of the day. And these devices come to know us because they've amassed incredible amounts of data, and they want to use that data in order to influence our choices, in order to make us consume the things that they want us to make us consume, ultimately. And so when I wrote this book, what I did was, among the things that I did was I went and I listened to every pronouncement made by the founders of these companies. And when Larry Page or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos says something about the latest product release or about how they bought Whole Foods or whatever, we focus on the thing at hand. But when you study their pronouncements, what you find is that they say incredibly interesting things about human beings, about human society, and about human nature. And we have a way of talking about Silicon Valley where we talk about them as libertarians, which is true to some extent, but it's a very surface understanding of the Silicon Valley mentality. And what I found was that they were fundamentally collectivist, that they have a view of human beings where we're all just one lump. That's why media is social. Everything is about the network, and it's about collaboration, and it's about life in this collective sort of existence. And once I realized that that was their mindset, it began to become much clearer to me about what they were doing to us. And their obsession with the collective was the reason why they were so insensitive to the demands of the individual and of individuality. It's why they're able to roll privacy. It's why they have so little concern for authorship and intellectual property. It's why they really don't care about free will. They want to replace free will with their algorithms. They want to produce this frictionless life where our decisions are being made for us by machines which know us better than ourselves. And to me, it's utterly terrifying. I came to this story by way of journalism. It's kind of an intimate tale where I'd been an editor of a magazine in Washington called The New Republic that got bought by Mark Zuckerberg's roommate from college, a guy called Chris Hughes, who was, when I first met him, was 28, worth $700 million. You hate him already. And we went through this experience of trying to reinvent our magazine, and we started off with very noble aspirations about how we were going to do things differently. But ultimately, he decided that we needed to make money, and the way to make money is to do what everybody else in journalism was doing, which was producing journalism, producing content is the word that would flourish on Facebook, because Facebook was this platform that reaches billions of people, and it was the only way that you could quickly grow traffic enough to produce the type of revenue that he wanted to produce. But what I could see was the ways in which the values of Facebook quickly became the values of the people producing journalism that would flourish on Facebook. An example, Nate mentioned the story of Cecil the Lion, who was a Facebook phenomenon. He was kind of the Kardashian of lions. When he was killed by this Minnesota hunter, there was a picture posted on Facebook, and Facebook went nuts over this. And let's posit that it's bad to kill endangered lions. Yet, once people saw what was popular, what worked on Facebook, everybody started to try to replicate that. And so this is part of the danger that I see in this world, see in this Facebook world, is the way in which formula begins to dominate, where past success begins to become the mechanism for trying to achieve future sort of success. And so the death of Cecil the Lion generated 3.2 million stories. And we think about the internet as being this great engine sometimes of individuality, where everybody can have a soapbox and everybody can have their own opinion and everybody can pursue their own interest. And that's kind of the beautiful dream of it all. But what often happens is the way in which we become herded into a pack. And the ways in which we begin to stop thinking for ourselves, and the ways in which we begin to become kind of, we become mastered by the algorithm. We become mastered by the platform on which we are now so thoroughly dependent. And I would argue, I don't want to make any judgments about the politics of the people in this room, but that, you know, the election of Donald Trump in a certain way was a grander, more disturbing vision of Cecil the Lion. Because what happens with Facebook is that Facebook gives us what it thinks that we want, whether it's the things that give us pleasure or the things that cause us anxiety. It's this giant feedback loop. And it's using data. It's using its constant surveillance of us to make those decisions. So it's developed this portrait of the inside of our heads based on everywhere that we've traveled on the internet, every question we've entered into Google, everything that we've ever bought, and it aggregates that. And then it tries to feed us information based on that knowledge that it has about our pleasure points and our anxieties. And it's created in politics these filter bubbles where we all get aligned with political teams and tribes because our biases are constantly being confirmed by the platform. And we've seen the effects of that on democracy. I'm just going to close with a story that might give you some hope after my rather dim apocalyptic pronouncements. Because why not? Which was that Amazon introduced the Kindle in 2009. And it seemed like everybody would gravitate towards ebooks. They were priced at $9.99. It was efficient. You had the Library of Alexandria at your fingertips. It could be delivered to you in an instant. What's not to like? And so people said that paper books were going to disappear for the planet. Nicholas Negroponte, who runs the MIT Media Lab, said by the year 2015, there would no longer be paper books published. Well, lo and behold, I think thanks to our hosts at Penguin Random House, you have evidence that refutes the Negroponte thesis. And so the question is, why has this happened? And my argument is that a lot of this is subconscious, but there's an argument that we've been formulating to ourselves as we've made this decision to stick with the hardcover book. We've made this decision to reject the thing that is efficient, to reject the thing that it costs less, because we want a space in our lives where we're not umbilically connected to a corporate store. We want a space in our lives where there's not somebody looking over our shoulder and surveilling us as we go about our day. We want a space in our lives where we're not being notified, pinged, dinged, addicted all the time. We want a quiet space and a space to ourselves. And that's the history of reading. The history of reading began as a public performance. It was literally the Word of God read from pulpits to illiterate audiences. But over time, as we became literate, as the printing press democratized the book, reading became the most private of all activities. That's why we do it in bathtubs, in beds, and easy chairs. And it's really this moment where we have the ability to contemplate the world and to tend to our human selves. And so that's the lesson ultimately to me, is that, you know, as we contend with all these questions, as universities contend with the question about the future of the humanities and about what, you know, can we have a way of teaching what it means to live a good life? And as we look out at our students who seem to be so glued to these devices, is this all inevitable? And I think it's not. I think it's possible for us to stage some sort of collective intervention where we say, you know what, these technologies are great. We don't need to throw our phones into the ocean. We don't need to give up on search engines or Google, but we can start to impose rules. We can start to teach moderation. We can start to find a way to live with these new technologies and these wonderful developments in such a way that means that as we merge with these machines, that we do it on terms that work for us. Thank you.